When my father died, my family told me, "Don't come to the funeral." 3 days later, I got a key. It opened a safe he kept hidden for 20 years. What I found inside was a secret that destroyed them all. I didn't expect much when I got the call. Not much at all. My father had been ill for years. Heart problems, diabetes, the usual wear and tear of a life lived with stubbornness and pride. I hadn't spoken to him in over a decade, not since he kicked me out of the house when I was 19. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzing on the kitchen counter as I made a late breakfast. Eggs, toast, black coffee. A routine I had built, simple, predictable. When I saw the number, something cold swept through me, like a shadow that made my hands tremble. It was my mother. I wasn't surprised. It was the way things always were. She called when it was necessary, not for small talk, never for love, just for what had to be done. "Your father's dead," she said without preamble. No emotion, no sympathy, just those words, blunt and sharp. I stood there in the kitchen, my hand still hovering over the frying pan. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. The words seemed foreign, out of place, as though she were talking about someone else. Maybe she wasn't even talking to me. But then the silence between us thickened, and I heard her voice again, colder than before. "You're not invited to the funeral." It felt like a slap, though she had not raised her hand. Not that she ever needed to. My mother's words had always been more effective than any physical punishment. They had a way of lodging themselves deep inside, festering, making me question who I was. I should have expected it. I wasn't the good son. I hadn't been the good son in years. My father's contempt for me had been clear ever since I could remember. It had only gotten worse as I grew older, after I left for college, after I tried to make a life for myself away from them. They had made sure I felt unwelcome, unwanted, a stranger in my own family. "You have no right to be at the funeral," she repeated, "and don't think about coming to the house. The family doesn't want you there." The line went silent. My heart beat harder than before, pounding in my chest as if trying to escape. There it was, the final judgment. My father was gone, but the invisible chains that had bound me to him, to her, to the family, remained. I closed my eyes and gripped the counter harder than I meant to. I could hear my father's voice in my head, echoing the same damn words he had used so many years ago when he shoved me out the door, when he told me I was no longer welcome under his roof. "You're a disgrace to this family." The words never stopped haunting me, never stopped following me. And now, even in death, he had found a way to continue punishing me. But I wasn't surprised. "Fine," I said quietly into the phone, my voice barely above a whisper. "I won't come." My mother didn't respond. The click of the phone was all I heard before the line went dead. I stood there for a long time, the phone still in my hand, staring at the cold, indifferent walls of my apartment. The weight of it settled on me in waves, this feeling of being an outsider in my own bloodline. I had long accepted the distance between us, but this was different. It was as if death had simply confirmed the thing I had always known, that I was never really part of the family to begin with. And then came the waiting. I tried to go on with my day, but nothing felt real. Nothing felt right. The phone call seemed like an echo in my mind, playing over and over again in a loop. My thoughts bounced between numbness and anger, but I didn't have the energy to process any of it. I decided to go for a walk. The streets of the city were busy, but the movement around me felt distant, as though I were watching life through a thick pane of glass. A few days passed, and I expected things to go quiet. But then, on the third day, I got a letter from a lawyer, not something I had expected, not something I had ever hoped for. I opened it slowly, feeling my pulse quicken, as I read the words inside. It was simple enough. "Your father has left you a key to a safe. Please contact our office to arrange a time to collect it." The words felt heavy, laden with meaning I couldn't yet understand. I folded the letter back up and tucked it into my coat pocket. For the first time in years, I felt something stir inside me. Something like curiosity. Or was it anger? I didn't know. Why had my father left me the key? Why not just disinherit me entirely, like he had always wanted to? I could feel the tension building within me, pulling me in different directions. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to see what was inside that safe. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was the last piece of the puzzle I had been waiting for my whole life. The day I went to collect the key felt like a turning point. Something in the air had changed, a quiet shift that I couldn't explain, but I could feel it in my bones. I drove to the lawyer's office, my hands gripping the steering wheel harder than usual, knuckles white. It felt almost absurd. After all these years of being ignored, of being cast out, why would my father leave me anything now? Why the key? What was it that he wanted me to see, to know, to carry? The office was located in a nondescript building downtown. I walked in and was immediately greeted by a woman in her late 30s, sharp features, glasses perched at the tip of her nose. She led me into a small, sterile room and handed me an envelope. "It's all in here," she said, her voice polite, detached. She didn't know me, but I could see the curiosity in her eyes. She must have wondered why someone who had been so estranged from the family would be receiving such an important letter. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I opened the envelope carefully, as though I feared disturbing something fragile. Inside was a small brass key, old-fashioned, a little worn, but still solid, as well as a slip of paper with an address. My father's old house. The place I hadn't stepped foot in since I left all those years ago. It was just a few blocks away from the lawyer's office. I left the office and drove straight there, the old house looming before me like a monument to everything I had lost. When I arrived, I stood at the gate for a moment, just staring at the house. Time had not been kind to it. The garden that once had been well kept and orderly now looked wild and overgrown, the hedges drooping like the memory of a time when this place had meant something. I took a deep breath, pushing past the surge of memories that threatened to overwhelm me. I walked up the old stone steps and into the house without hesitation. The door was unlocked, as if it were still waiting for someone to walk through it. My father's absence felt all around me. The place was silent, except for the creaks of the wooden floors beneath my feet. I had almost forgotten how cold it felt here. The coldness that had always surrounded my father, my mother. The coldness that had seeped into every corner of the house, like it was part of the air itself. I made my way through the familiar hallways, my footsteps echoing, each room a ghost of the past. The old furniture, now faded and worn, seemed to whisper forgotten stories. My father's study was at the end of the hall, the room I had spent so many hours avoiding as a child, the place where his presence had always been most oppressive. The safe was hidden behind a large bookshelf, the same one I had seen countless times growing up, the one my father never let me touch. I approached it slowly, feeling the weight of it like a burden. There was a strange anticipation building in my chest, but I didn't know what to expect. My hands were shaking as I inserted the key into the lock. The mechanism clicked, and the heavy door creaked open. Inside, there was nothing particularly extravagant, just a few old leather-bound books, some documents, a few worn-out photographs. But as I sifted through them, something caught my eye. A stack of letters. They were all addressed to me, my name written in my father's familiar, almost illegible scrawl. My stomach twisted as I pulled the first one free, and then another, and another. There had to be at least 10 of them. I sat down on the floor, the letters scattered around me like a map of my life, and I began to read. The first letter was dated almost 20 years ago. "I know you hate me. I know you think I've been hard on you, but it's because I want you to be better than I was. I know I've pushed you too far, but I couldn't let you fail. The world is harsh, and I wanted you to understand that. I didn't want you to be weak. I swallowed hard, my fingers trembling as I turned the page. This wasn't the father I had known. The father who had belittled me, told me I would never amount to anything. This was remorse, regret. But the letters only got more painful as I read on. The second one, I regret the way things have gone between us. I know you won't forgive me, and I don't deserve it. But there's something you need to know. I've made mistakes. I've ruined everything. And I'm sorry. I felt the anger building again, the old wounds reopening. But as I read on, a part of me couldn't help but soften. Was this my father's attempt at redemption? At least, at the end, he seemed to understand what he had done. Then came the third letter, and the real shock came. I know you're probably reading this after I'm gone. I should have told you this a long time ago, but I didn't have the courage. Your mother and I, we kept a lot from you. Not just about you, about everything. I've kept this secret for far too long, and it's time you knew the truth. You're not who you think you are. You were never meant to inherit the family name. My breath caught in my throat, my heart hammering in my chest. This wasn't the letter I expected. I kept reading, unable to stop. The more I read, the more I understood. My father's confession was here, hidden in the depths of his safe. He had left me the truth, the secrets he had buried for years, the kind of truth that had the power to ruin everything I thought I knew. And then, the final blow. The estate, the money, it's all yours. Everything I have is yours. I know I've failed you as a father, but this is my last attempt to make it right. The world owes you something, and I owe you everything. I couldn't breathe. My father had left me everything. His fortune, his legacy, and a secret that would change everything. But at what cost? My heart was still pounding in my chest, my hands trembling as I sat there, surrounded by the words he had never spoken to me in life. And as I sat there in the dim light of that cold room, I realized something else. This wasn't just about money. This was about power, about revenge. And now I had the chance to make everything right. The silence in the room was almost suffocating, my mind racing as I read and reread the letter. I could feel the weight of the words pressing down on me, making the room feel smaller, the air thicker. My father had always been a man of few words, always so controlling, so distant. But these letters, these were different. They were a confession. They were the last thing he had ever written, the last thing he wanted me to know. I sat on the floor for what felt like hours, just staring at the stack of papers in front of me. It was hard to wrap my head around it. My father had left me everything, his estate, his wealth, his legacy. But there was more than that. There was the truth about my own identity, about my very place in this family. You're not who you think you are. You were never meant to inherit the family name. Those words kept repeating in my head over and over. What the hell did he mean by that? Was I adopted? Was I not his son at all? I picked up the next letter. The truth is, I had another child. Your mother and I kept it hidden from you, kept it from everyone. Your sister knows the truth, but I'm afraid it's too late for you to do anything about it now. She's the one who will inherit everything, not you. But you are my son, and I want you to know the truth before it's too late. I almost couldn't breathe. This was too much. My sister? I had always assumed that she was the favored one, the perfect daughter who could do no wrong in my father's eyes, the one who never had to struggle, who had always been at the center of the family. But now I realized that everything had been a lie. I stood up, my mind spinning. The anger, the confusion, the disbelief. It was all boiling up inside me, threatening to overflow. I had spent my entire life believing I was the disappointment, the one who didn't measure up. But what if that wasn't true? What if everything I had been told about myself was a lie? What if I was the one who had been wronged? I took the next letter. I've left a portion of the estate to you, but I cannot deny the truth any longer. Your sister was always meant to take control. She's the one who will carry on the family name. But don't let that fool you. She's no better than the rest of us. She's the one who's manipulated the family, manipulated you. She's the one who has kept the secrets hidden for so long. And now, you need to decide what to do with that information. I dropped the letter on the floor, my hands trembling. I could feel my chest tightening, the walls closing in on me. Everything was falling apart. My father's confession wasn't just about the inheritance. It was about the years of manipulation, the lies, the betrayal. My sister had known. She had known all along. She had known I wasn't the one meant to inherit, and she had kept that secret from me. The whole family had kept it from me. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. My heart was racing, a rush of emotions flooding through me. For years, I had hated my father. I had despised him for the way he treated me, for the way he pushed me away, for the way he made me feel like I didn't belong. But now, I wasn't sure what to feel. The truth about my sister, about the inheritance, it made everything I had suffered feel like it had been in vain. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. Not after everything she had done. Not after all the lies. I stood up, the determination starting to settle in my chest. It was time to take control. I had been weak for too long. I had let them push me around, let them manipulate me. But now, it was my turn. I had the power now. The truth was mine, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. I grabbed the final letter, the one with the will. It was the last piece of the puzzle. I'm sorry it had to be this way, but the family has been cursed by secrets for too long. I know I can't fix the damage I've done, but I hope this final act will bring you some peace. The estate, everything I have left, it's yours. You don't have to share it with anyone. It's yours. The words burned into me. This wasn't just about money. This was about everything I had lost. My family, my past, my identity. And now it was all mine. But I knew it wasn't going to be that easy. I had no doubt that my sister and my mother would fight me for it. They would try to use every trick in the book to get what they thought was rightfully theirs. But I was ready for that. I wasn't the weak, helpless son anymore. The truth had set me free, but it had also bound me to a new kind of battle. And this time, I was going to win. I stood in the dim light of the room, the letters scattered around me. I couldn't shake the feeling that my life was about to change forever. This wasn't just a matter of inheritance. It was a matter of reclaiming what had been taken from me. I couldn't undo the years of pain, the years of feeling like I didn't belong. But I could do something about the future. I could make sure my sister didn't get away with the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. It was time to make them pay. The first step would be confronting my mother and sister, but that could wait. I wasn't in any rush. For once in my life, I was in control, and I wasn't going to let them take that from me. The days that followed were a blur. I didn't sleep much, my mind racing with thoughts of the letters and what they meant for me. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of purpose, a strange and almost dangerous confidence that had been absent for as long as I could remember. But at the same time, there was an undeniable weight in the pit of my stomach. I knew the battle wasn't going to be easy. My mother and sister weren't going to let me walk away with everything my father had left me without a fight. They would come after me, threaten me, try to manipulate me, just like they always had. But this time I wasn't afraid. I had the truth now. And the truth, no matter how ugly, could be a powerful weapon. The confrontation began with a phone call from my mother. Her voice, cold as ever, echoed through the receiver, but there was an edge to it this time. A thinly veiled anger that she couldn't hide. "You have no right to take what's mine," she said, her words clipped. "Your father was a fool to leave you anything. You were never supposed to be part of this family. You don't belong here." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat, but I kept my voice calm, steady. "Is that so? Well, it seems your husband didn't think so, Mother," I replied, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "He left everything to me. All of it. I think it's time you realize the truth." I could hear her sharp intake of breath. It was as if I had struck her, the sudden shift in the air palpable, even through the phone. "Don't talk to me like that," she spat. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. Your sister—" "Enough," I cut her off, the words escaping more sharply than I intended. "I don't want to hear about her anymore. It's over. The will's been read. I'm in charge now." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment I almost thought she was going to hang up. But then I heard her soft, almost broken voice. "You'll regret this," she warned, her tone low and dangerous. "You think you know everything, but you don't. You have no idea what you're up against." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I let the silence linger for a moment, letting her words hang in the air like a threat. When I finally spoke, my voice was cold. "I'm not afraid of you anymore. I'm not afraid of anything you throw at me. Not anymore." The call ended abruptly, but I knew this wasn't the last I'd hear from her. Later that evening, I got another call, this time from my sister. Her voice was soft, feigning concern, but I knew better. It was a tone she used whenever she wanted to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty for things I had no reason to feel guilty about. "You have to listen to me," she said, her words almost too sweet. "I know this is hard for you. I know you never wanted any of this, but we have to be a family. You can't just take everything and leave us with nothing." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the silence of my apartment. "A family? You don't know the meaning of the word. You and Mom have been playing this game for years, manipulating me, leaving me out in the cold. Don't pretend now that you care." There was a pause, a silence on the other end that made me think she was surprised by my response. My sister had always seen me as weak, always assumed I would cave to her demands, but I wasn't the same person anymore. "I don't want to fight," she said after a moment, her voice almost pleading. "You don't understand what's at stake here. If you take everything, it'll destroy us. It'll destroy Mom. Please, just think about what you're doing." But I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to be manipulated again. Not by her, not by my mother, not by anyone. "I'm not going to give it up, Claire. It's mine now. I'm not going to let you or Mom ruin my life anymore. Not after everything you've done." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she spoke again, her voice colder this time. "You're making a mistake. You'll regret this." "I don't think I will," I replied, my voice firm, unshakable. "I'm done being your punching bag." The call ended, but I could feel the tension building, the impending conflict looming over me. I knew it wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The next few days were filled with more phone calls, more threats, and more attempts to sway me. My mother and sister tried everything, from guilt-tripping me to outright threats. But I didn't flinch. I had the upper hand now. They no longer held any power over me. The final confrontation came when they showed up at my door, both of them, standing there like a pair of vultures, ready to pick at the carcass of whatever was left of our family. My mother was the first to speak, her voice tight with fury. "You think you've won, don't you?" she spat. "You think you can just take everything and leave us with nothing. You don't deserve it. You never did." My sister stood behind her, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable, though I could see the frustration in her eyes. They were trying to intimidate me, to force me into submission, but it didn't work anymore. "I'm not giving it up," I said calmly, standing my ground. "You'll never have control over me again." "You don't understand," my mother hissed, stepping closer. "If you don't do as we say, we'll make sure you lose everything. The law, the courts. It's all on our side. You can't just take what's ours." I smiled coldly, the bitterness in my chest finally breaking free. "I don't think you have a leg to stand on," I said. "I have the will. Everything is mine. You can try to fight it, but in the end, it won't matter. You lost." The silence that followed was thick, heavy. My mother's face twisted with rage, but there was nothing she could do. She knew it. My sister knew it. The battle was over, but it wasn't over for me. Not yet. They may have lost the battle, but I wasn't going to let them walk away from this unscathed. They had spent years trying to destroy me, trying to make me feel like I was nothing. But now I had the power. Now they would feel what it was like to lose everything. And they would beg for mercy. But I wouldn't give it to them. Not anymore. This time, I was in control. And I wasn't going to let them take that from me. I had always imagined the moment when I finally stood on top, when I could look down at the people who had hurt me and let them know they no longer held power over me. I had fantasized about it for years. But now, as I stood in the cold, dimly lit hallway of the lawyer's office, it wasn't quite as satisfying as I thought it would be. I held the final document in my hand, the official will, signed and notarized. It confirmed what I already knew. Everything, every penny of my father's wealth, every asset, every piece of property, was mine. And the best part? I had the law on my side. The lawyer's words echoed in my mind. There is no challenge that can stand. Everything is legally binding. You have a right to everything your father left you. It should have been a victory, a triumph, but in truth, it felt hollow. It felt like the last piece of a broken puzzle. The puzzle I had been trying to solve for years. And now that it was complete, all that was left was the bitter taste of revenge. The next day, I sent a letter to my mother and sister. A simple letter, but one that carried a weight that no words could quite capture. In it, I made it clear that the fight was over, that I was taking control, and that any further attempts to manipulate or challenge me would only make things worse for them. I was done. The gloves were off. It wasn't long before they came to my door again. This time, there was no pleading, no pretense of concern. My mother stood there with a cold, calculating look in her eyes, and my sister, quieter than usual, watched me from the doorway. They knew the game was up, but they weren't going to go down without a fight. "Have you lost your mind?" my mother snapped. Her voice was no longer full of anger, but desperation. "This isn't what your father wanted. You think you can just take everything and leave us with nothing? We've been a family for decades. You can't just wipe us out like that." "You've been manipulating me for decades," I replied, my voice unwavering. "You and Claire have used me, ignored me, and pushed me aside for as long as I can remember. But no more." "I am still your mother," she hissed. "You owe me. You owe me everything." I stepped closer to her, keeping my gaze fixed on hers, steady and cold. "You don't own me anymore, and you never did." My sister, who had been silent up until now, stepped forward. "You think you've won, don't you?" she asked quietly, her voice full of bitterness. "You think you've finally beaten us. But you're wrong. You'll never be one of us." I laughed, a short, bitter sound that didn't even feel like my own. "One of you? You've never been a family. You're just a group of people trying to manipulate and control everything. But that ends today." The silence that followed was heavy. My mother's face was pale, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Claire was tense, her arms folded tightly across her chest as she stared at me, trying to gauge my next move. But they didn't know me anymore. I wasn't the scared, abandoned boy they used to ignore. I was in charge now, and I wasn't about to let them take it from me. "You're nothing," my mother sneered. "You're just a mistake your father regretted." Her words hit me like a slap, but instead of retreating like I once would have, I stood taller. "No," I said calmly. "You're the mistake, and so is she." I gestured toward Claire, who flinched slightly at the words. You tried to control me. You tried to break me. But you failed. And now it's my turn. My mother opened her mouth to retort, but I cut her off. You've had your chance. You've had your time. Now it's mine. The next few days were tense, filled with calls and letters threatening legal action, but I wasn't worried. I had the proof. I had the documents. I had the will, the letters, and the law on my side. They had nothing left to threaten me with. They tried to manipulate the lawyers, tried to find a way to invalidate the will, but it was airtight. They had no case. The final blow came when I sold off the family estate, the one my father had built for them, and liquidated the assets. I made sure to transfer the money into my own accounts, and then I turned the house over to a real estate agency. It was no longer theirs. I didn't do it out of spite, at least not entirely. There was a part of me that knew this was what my father had wanted. Not for the money, but for the closure. He had left me the key to the family's future, and I was using it to close the door once and for all. The final confrontation came when my mother and sister showed up at my door one last time. Their faces were drawn, their eyes hollow from the months of stress and legal battles that had drained them. But they were still defiant, still trying to save face. I don't know what you think you've gained, my mother said, her voice shaking with a mix of fury and desperation. But you've ruined everything. You've destroyed this family. No, you did, I replied calmly, my gaze unflinching. You ruined everything by making me feel worthless, by making me feel like I didn't belong. But I do belong, and this is where I'm meant to be. I stepped back, opening the door wider. This is where I end it. They stood there, unable to respond. My mother's face twisted, her lips trembling as the weight of everything that had happened sank in. Please, she whispered, her voice small, broken. Don't do this. I looked at her, and for the first time I felt nothing. No anger, no sorrow, no regret. I'm done, I said simply. I closed the door in their faces, and I never looked back. I, on the other hand, was free. Free from the chains that had bound me for so long. Free from the lies, the guilt, and the fear. For the first time in my life, I was in control, and I had learned one very important lesson. Sometimes the only way to take control of your life is to let go of the past. I walked away, my head held high, leaving them behind to face the consequences of their own actions. They had tried to break me, but in the end, it was they who had broken themselves. And as I moved forward, I knew one thing for certain. I would never let anyone control me again. Not ever.